Were there advanced civilizations in the Amazon? And if so, what do we know about them? Recently, some of you may have seen new information coming out about how LiDAR, which stands for Light Detection and Ranging images, have revealed ancient roads and foundations in the Amazon, far more advanced than previously imagined. According to these LiDAR case studies, which will be linked down in the description below, they have revealed structures that were specifically made in, quote, uniform spatial design, likely a physical representation of the indigenous cosmos, end quote. As above, so below. These LiDAR images are evidence that Amazonian civilizations were actually far more advanced than previously thought. In the past, most historians stated that the Amazon basin was a sparsely populated place since the area did not have rich soil suitable for cultivation that could have supported these dense populations. However, today, many anthropologists have challenged these old claims after the discovery of Terra Preta, also known as Dark Earth, a rich, black, fertile soil that scientists believe may have been designed by the ancient Amazonians in order to maintain a large-scale agricultural society. Slowly, our view of ancient Amazonian civilization is starting to shift perspectives in our modern society. Originally, we had the idea that they were mostly hunter-gatherer societies who were unable to cultivate the land in large quantities. Now, after this recent evidence has come up, it's starting to shift perspectives to that of a massive agricultural society, similar to those of ancient Mesopotamia, where they would have had more time to develop their arts and sciences. Because of this recent shift in perspective, many different theories have begun sprouting up from questionable sources around the internet about how advanced these Amazonian civilizations may have been. So after being fascinated by the subject, as my hero, Bill Gates, would say,
I decided to look at the data, and what I found surprised me.
In researching, I found information regarding the first full exploration of the Amazon River by Francisco de Orellana, and all the strange things he apparently came across in his journey, like civilizations stretching miles across the Amazon River, fierce female warriors similar to the Amazonians of Greek myth, and even Native Americans with European racial features. You can find direct accounts online through the Internet Archive of the discovery of the Amazon, but I decided to buy the book, The Discovery of the Amazon According to the Account of Gaspar de Carvajal and Other Documents, edited by H.C. Heaton and published by the American Geographical Society in 1934. This is the first-hand account of Friar Gaspar de Carvajal, a Spanish Dominican missionary who joined the expeditions of Gonzalo Pizarro and Francisco de Orellana, and recorded information about the expedition in great detail. Friar Carvajal's written account remained obscure until it was published in 1895 by José Toribio Medina, later being revised and republished in 1934 by H.C. Heaton. For many centuries, scholars dismissed Friar Carvajal's reports of these large Amazonian civilizations, since they thought the Amazonian soil was too acidic and not able to support the level of agriculture necessary to sustain a large population. However, as previously discussed, there is evidence that they were actually able to sustain a large agricultural civilization with Terra Preta. Because of this recent evidence developing the case for advanced Amazonian civilizations, I will be going over many other examples of strange things Friar Carvajal saw in the Amazon that could also possibly be true, since he has now gained more credibility in these past years. For the rest of the video, I will be directly quoting many passages from Friar Carvajal's account while supplementing the direct page number, so that if you want to read them for yourself, you may do so. But before I continue, it would be best to give a quick synopsis of the events that led to Orellana's trip down the Amazon River. In the year 1539, the Marquis Don Francisco Pizarro, being in the city of Cuzco, heard that east of the city of Quito there was a wide region where cinnamon grew. So Francisco Pizarro sent his brother Gonzalo Pizarro to conquer the land of cinnamon and become governor of it. In Quito, Gonzalo Pizarro collected a force of 220 Spaniards and 4,000 natives and left Quito February 1541. Orellana gathered troops and horses at Guayaquil and met up with Pizarro's party in March. By the time the expedition had left the mountains, 3,000 natives and 140 Spanish had either died or deserted. Once they reached the river Coca, Pizarro ordered a small brigantine to be constructed, and that Orellana should explore the Coca River for food before returning back. Orellana set out with 57 men, not 50 as Wikipedia states. Gaspar de Carvajal was one of the 57 men. According to Carvajal, the 57 men embarked on the brigantine and in certain canoes taken from the Indians, and they began proceeding down the river with the idea of promptly returning back if food was found. However, they did not find any food for a distance of 200 leagues, and because of this, they were on the verge of starvation. They also realized that because of the current of the river, it would be nearly impossible for them to return all the way back to Pizarro, and so Orellana's men threatened mutiny if they did not continue down the river. On December 16, 1541, Orellana and his men made the decision to continue down the river. Friar Carvajal writes, quote, "It was decided that we should choose of two evils the one which to the captain and to all should appear to be the lesser, which was to go forward and follow the river, and thus either die or see what there was along it." After this decision was made, they proceeded down the river at the rate of 20 to 25 leagues per day. They journeyed for 3 days without finding any inhabited country at all. They continued sailing down the river in starvation so bad that, according to Carvajal, quote, "We were eating nothing but leather, belts and soles of shoes, cooked with certain herbs, with the result that so great was our weakness that we could not remain standing. For some on all fours, with staves, went into the woods to search for a few roots to eat, and some there were who ate certain herbs with which they were not familiar, and they were at the point of death, because they were like madmen, and did not possess sense. But as our Lord was pleased that we should continue on our journey, no one died." On New Year's Day 1542, some of the men said they heard Indian drums, and some said they did not. But eventually, Orellana and the others heard the drums, and they all rowed hard to an Indian village. The party jumped from their boat and advanced into the village, which the Indians had fled. And seeing that the Indians had left behind food that they were preparing, they ate all the food they could, thinking that they could never satisfy themselves. The Indians saw how emaciated and desperate the conquistadors were, and so they pitied them. Orellana spoke with the Aparians, who inhabited this village, and their overlord, aptly named Aparia. The overlord of the Aparians called over the other overlords of the area, 13 in total, and they spoke with Orellana, where he, quote, "took possession of them, and of the said land, in the name of his majesty," end quote. Carvajal doesn't state specifically if the 13 overlords fully understood what Orellana was doing in that moment, but regardless, the Aparians treated the conquistadors very well, supplying them with food, quote, "as if all their lives they had been servants," end quote. As the Aparians were supplying the expedition with food, they noticed that the Aparians wore jewels and gold medallions, which the conquistadors acted indifferent to, so that the natives wouldn't know they valued such things. The more indifferent they acted towards the natives' jewelry, the more they put on. Carvajal writes, quote, "It was here that they informed us of the existence of the Amazons, and of the wealth farther down the river. And the one who gave us this information was an Indian overlord named Aparia, an old man who said he had been in that country, and he also told us about another overlord who lived at some distance from the river, far inland, who, he said, possessed very great wealth in gold, This overlord's name is Inca. Never did we get to see him, because, as I say, he kept away from the river where we were." End quote. The expedition of Orellana decided to leave this village since they saw that they were becoming irksome to the natives and they wished to leave in peace. The expedition traveled 20 leagues at first to reach an important overlord named Ira Morani, who is said to be of much intelligence. However, because of the strong whirlpools in the river, the expedition was forced to continue down the river another 200 leagues to another village they had heard about. They reached this village and some others, in which they stayed for some days, being treated well by the natives and being given parrots and turtles in abundance to eat. On their way to a fairer village, further down the river, the expedition came across vassals of Aparians the Great, who were in 4 to 5 canoes. The vassals said they were commanded by Aparians the Great to bring them food, which included birds, fish, and turtles the size of leather shields. These vassals guided the expedition in their canoes to the village of Aparians the Great. When they were finally led to this village, the natives of said village came out into their canoes in the attitude of warriors. Because of this hostility, Orellana decided to row in full force to the bank of the village and be ready for an attack. They did so, and the natives got out of the way, but because of Orellana's ability to speak the natives' language, they did not attack. Orellana told the natives to have no fear, and so they rejoiced with their overlord, coming out to meet Orellana. The overlords of the area sat down with Orellana, while they commanded their followers to give the expedition manatees, fish, birds, cats, and monkeys. Orellana told the overlords that they were Christians who worshipped a single god and were not like the natives who worshipped images made by man. Orellana continued, saying that they were sent by the emperor of the Christians, the King of Spain, Don Carlos, and that by his command they were coming to that land and were going to make a report to him on what they had seen in it. The overlords told them not to visit the Amurians, whom they call Goni Puyara in their tongue, which means grand mistresses, for they would kill them. The next part is one of the most confusing passages in the entire account, and because of this I could not tell who was doing what. So I will just quote this part of the conversation here for you, the viewer, to interpret. Quote, "The captain told them, the Aparian overlords, that he could not avoid at least passing by at a distance, in order to give an account to him who was sending him, who was his king and master. And, after the captain had spoke, and it seemed as if the listeners were very content, that chief overlord asked who he was, and as by way of seeing if the captain showed any discrepancy in his words, he asked to be better informed about what was being told to him. The latter told him in reply the same things that he had just explained to him. And he told him more, namely, that we were children of the sun, and that the object of our journey was to go down that river, as he had already told him. At this the Indians marveled greatly, and manifested great joy, taking us to be saints or celestial beings, because they worshipped the sun, and hold him, the sun, to be their god, who they themselves call Chise." It is important to know who is speaking here, because it could mean one of two things. Either Orellana is saying that the conquistadors are the children of the sun, so that he may gain favor in the eyes of the Aparians, or the chief overlord is interpreting Orellana's explanation of who the conquistadors say they are as the children of the sun. I assume the truth to be the latter, since it would be odd for Orellana to tell the Aparians that their religion of worshipping idols is false, and then right after claim that they are celestial beings who are a part of their religion. I think it is more likely that Orellana's explanation of how they were Christians who worshipped one god got misinterpreted in translation to mean to the chief overlord that they were children of the one sun. After this event, 26 native overlords told Orellana that whatever he asked of would be given to him. So, Orellana asked for food and supplies so that they could build a seaworthy brigantine, since their plan was to sail out of the Amazon into the Atlantic Ocean. Carvajal writes, quote, "For had we not gone on down from there, using only the original boat and canoes, coming as we afterwards did upon warlike people, we could neither have defended ourselves nor gotten out of the river in safety." End quote. It took the men of Orellana 35 days to finish building the brigantine, but this is the part where the story gets really weird, and I was astonished at what I was reading while continuing down these pages. While building the brigantine in this village, Carvajal writes, quote, "In the meantime, while we were engaged in this task, there came to see the captain 4 Indians, who approached us, and they were of such a stature that each one was taller by a span than the tallest Christian, and they were quite white, and had very fine hair, which reached down to their waists, and they came all decked out in gold and splendid attire, and they brought much food, and they approached with such humbleness that we were all amazed at their manners and good breeding. They took out a great quantity of food and placed it before the captain, and told him how they were vassals of a very great overlord, and that it was by his command that they came to see who we were, or what we wanted, or where we were going. And the captain received them very nicely, and before conversing with them he commanded that they be given many trinkets, which they esteemed highly, and they were greatly pleased. The captain told them all that he had told the overlord Aparians, whereat the Indians were not a little astonished. And the Indians said to the captain that they wished to go and make a report to their overlord, and begged the captain to give them permission to depart. The captain gave it to them, and told them to depart with his best wishes, and gave them many things for them to present to their principal overlord, and asked them to tell him that the captain earnestly requested to meet him, to come to pay him a visit, because he would get a great deal of pleasure out of meeting him. And they said that they would do so, and they left. And never more did we hear anything as to where they were from, or from what country they had come on their way to this place." End quote. This passage right here is one of the many reasons I decided to make this video, because I have never heard of this from any sources regarding the Orellana expedition. This is a huge detail that seems to be glossed over by many historians and researchers who cover this topic, and I can't see why that is. The first thought that popped into my head when I heard this was that maybe these are descendants of Leif Erikson, who's supposed to have established a Norse settlement in Newfoundland, Canada, but it seems that it is hard to believe that a relatively small settlement could have migrated a distance of thousands of miles after already having migrated so far to get to Newfoundland in the first place. The Viking theory is quite a reach. I know earlier in this video I stated that these 4 Native Americans had European racial features. I said that because that is the best short description I can come up with. But in reality, I imagine Carvajal would have had said that they looked European if they did indeed look European, but he doesn't. Carvajal describes them as, first, Indians, quite white, with very fine hair, likely in comparison to the other Indians who reportedly had darker skin tones and thicker hair on average. So I imagine these 4 natives may have carried the same racial features of the other Native Americans, except of course for their taller stature, whiter skin, and finer hair. Most likely this is just the results of a genetic mutation in the population that led to the society of tall white Indians. However, that doesn't fully explain the odd behavior of these 4 people. Carvajal points out that, quote, "they approached with such humbleness that we were amazed at their manners and good breeding, and that the Indians were not a little astonished." End quote. After hearing Orellana tell them all he had told the Aparians, this is how they reacted. This is the part that surprised me the most about these people. A genetic anomaly is one thing, but how could they not be a little astonished at the stories of the Spaniards? Most natives in this region regard the Spaniards as celestial beings sent by their sun god, but these four natives were acting as if the Spaniards were just some important travelers who they needed information from in order to report back to their overlord. Perhaps they were commanded to be reserved with their emotions since they were representing their overlord, or maybe it's how they always are when they interact. They may have wanted to appear as if they were not surprised also, as to not show weakness or ignorance of the world around them. In my research of this entire story, I've come across a lot of fringe and crazy sounding theories as to a lot of the unexplained events that the Orellana expedition comes across. Not really too many about the four Native Americans, though, that we meet here in this encounter. But one of the more crazy theories that I came across was that perhaps the reason these people weren't so astonished is because they were already familiar with the Europeans across the ocean, and this wasn't the first time they had come across them. And this obviously sounds crazy at first, and if any accredited academics are watching this far, they're already clicking the dislike button. But we have to keep in mind that there are millions of individuals today who believe that people have crossed over the Atlantic to the Americas long before Leif Erikson or Columbus. For example, in Mormonism, one of the most fundamental beliefs is that an ancient Hebrew society migrated from Jerusalem across the Atlantic to what would become America. This is how we got the Joseph Smith story, where he supposedly found the famous golden plates around 1823, which were allegedly buried in America by this Hebrew society. And for the record, I'm not Mormon and I don't personally believe any of what I just said, but the fact remains that this is not some new theory, and it's believed by millions of people around the world. I know that I am diving into deep speculation here, but I feel that all these alternate theories must be at least considered if we are to ever hope at arriving at the truth, no matter how strange that may seem. So after all that, I'd say my best guess as to who these four natives could be is that they are most likely a result of some genetic mutation in the population, and that they represent some highly esteemed overlord inland in the river. Or maybe Carvajal is just exaggerating or outright lying about this encounter. Okay, that was quite a lot of speculation right there. I will continue this story later in the next video, since if I did it all in one video, it would be like a 2-hour video. But thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It helps me out so much as a new channel. And please discuss this in the comments what you think. I'm not a academic. I'm not a history professional. I'm not qualified to talk about this at all. I just heard about this. I thought it was fake, and then I read the account, and I was like, wow, it has some credibility to it. I'm not saying it's real. I'm not saying it's fake. I'm just saying there's at least a primary source of someone who says it's real. So that's something to go off. That's something to talk about. So please discuss it in the comments and let me know what you think. And have a good day.